I did one thing for 1,000 days straight. Yes, 1,000 straight days, I did one thing. That thing is podcasts. So over the last 3 years, I've been doing literally the same thing every single day for 3 years. Now, why did I do that? Before we do that, a little bit myself. So my name is Darren Lee. I'm host of Kickoff Sessions and founder of Voix. Basically, all I do is podcasts to help younger people live a richer, more fulfilling life. Over the last 3 years, I've been able to build a business, brand, and really identity around my own podcast. And it's been through a lot of hardship, a lot through challenges, and a lot of difficulties that I want to get into today. So why did I do it, right? I wanted to start my podcast and I wanted to do kickoff sessions to really help a younger version of me. I was going through a period of work where I really didn't like what I was doing and I wanted to actually network with other people. I found it super hard to move company or figure out what I wanted to even do with my life, and that's why I started a podcast. The whole idea was to do something that was social and stick to it, right? So for the last 3 years, I've basically had the exact same focus throughout consistently, and I want to get through why that actually was, right? So during this period, I never took a day off. I never went on like vacation from it. I never said I needed a break. I never blamed the algorithm for why things were working or were not working. From the early days, I was literally getting fuck all engagement, right? So if you're starting something new and if you want to do something new, I had no following, no followers, no engagement. I didn't even have that many people behind me that were like supporting it. They just thought it was just going to come and go like everything else in life. But the whole idea was to commit to something and put everything into it to see what I can do from it, right? Of course, that's the main message in terms of why you do anything. You want to put all your effort into it. So in the very beginning, I literally stuck to trying to be very consistent with it. Like everything else, we came out with episodes every single week. So for the past almost 3 years now at this stage, every single Wednesday there's been an episode come out. Sometimes there's even been 2 episodes per week, right? And it was not about really the outcome. It's more about the actual input. Being able to pick something and really stick with it for the long term is something that is very, very valuable to me. And it's something that I actually really want to have as my main core values, is that if I pick something up, I actually truly stick to it. So in the beginning, as I mentioned, I had literally 0 downloads as weeks were going on. It started off pretty well, and then it kind of went into this little kind of trough of nothingness for a while. And over time, I was developing actual skill, right? And the skill what I was developing was really communication, being able to communicate with people, selling my own ideas. So the sale of basically trying to get people onto my podcast and understand, you know, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to achieve, and this is what I can actually help and provide you, which is also very important. And then also being able to market my podcast. So in the beginning, it was pretty much a one-dimensional audio podcast that was super boring, super dry, super static. And over time, it has now grown into a bit of a beast. We have a bit of a content flywheel that's constantly running and driving more engagement. And this is something that I bring to a lot of my clients in our media company, and also what I bring through in all our other products and services, right? So how I actually stuck my mind to this was the fact that during a period I was working a 9 to 5, I was working in consulting, I was also working in financial technology, and the whole idea was to carve out time that I knew I was going to stick to. Whether it was 1 hour, 40 minutes, 20 minutes, or up to 2 or 3 hours a day, stick to that plan, right? So every day, it wasn't exactly like I was recording a new podcast. I was just moving the needle ever so slightly. And that's very fundamental towards like any success with anything you're going to do, which is what brought me into the business world from there. I just made sure that every day we were either sharing a story or reaching out to a guest or identifying a new guest or even just writing content around it. But basically taking one step further, one bit of a time, right? And that is the biggest challenge that I found, that a lot of times people will do something, they'll get a big burst of energy, and then a couple of weeks later, it's all over, right? They want to move on to the next thing, the next Web 3.0 AI bullshit tool. The whole idea is just that whatever you stick to, you gotta really follow through. And, you know, it wasn't like I lived in a cave during this period. I was traveling. I was in Mexico. I was in the Philippines. I was in Singapore. I was in Bali. I was in Thailand. I was constantly moving to some degree. So you need to be super ruthless with how you devise your time, how you allocate your time, and really what is the return on investment, right? And for me, the return on investment was mainly around my personal brand and mainly around my career in the beginning. At the time, Kickoff Sessions started off as a vanilla career podcast. The whole idea was really to help younger people move through like a career ladder and get up to a COO role. Then over time, my interest changed. It just merged. As I got older, I developed my first wrinkle, and I thought it's time to move on to something else. And that's when I moved into the online business space. I started connecting with a lot of people who were, smashing at 23, 24 years old, and it wasn't airy-fairy. It was actually, they weren't gurus effectively. They were legit. And then as a result, that's where my interest kind of fell over. And that's where I got a lot of the growth from the podcast, right? So the people talk about like hockey stick growth, that something takes a long time and it still kicks up. Well, I'm going to be completely honest with you. After the last 3 years of doing this every single day, it is still not a major success, right? I'm not Chris Williamson, Andrew Huberman, Joe Rogan, fucking Stephen Bartlett. I'm none of these guys yet, all right? I'm on my way. I'm trying my best, of course. And of course, there's no guarantees. So that's what I want to get across, the fact that you can put all this time into something. And yeah, it may not still work out. But you know what? That's not really the actual purpose. The main idea is that you're developing, you're learning, you're improving, right? And if I look back on my last episodes, from the last 10, 20, 50, even 100 episodes, they're gradually getting better, and then they actually get better a lot faster, right? We've just overpassed on our channel maybe 3 million views on YouTube across all of our content, which is tremendous over the past 2 years of only actually being on YouTube. So this isn't an overnight success. It isn't a get fucking famous quick scheme or whatever you want to call it. It's slow, gradual, and also very painful at times, right? I've had a lot of moments whereby I've actually wanted to even give up, and my girlfriend actually was the person who recommended me to start a podcast. In the first 6 months, I think I wanted to give up nearly every second day because nothing was working. It was like you put some bit of effort in and you don't get that dopamine reward, you don't get that return on investment, and you think, fuck it, should I just give up, should I just do something else? But I'm using a lot of the principles that I learned from being in the gym quite young, following that process of putting on muscle or getting shredded or going in and smashing exams or going through work and smashing your work and getting promoted. I'd use those principles to just stay super fucking consistent the entire period and make sure that, okay, yeah, the growth isn't coming today, it may not come tomorrow, it may not come in a month's time, but eventually we're going to break through. Eventually it's going to get to the next stage. Eventually I'm also going to improve, right? And that was the biggest thing from here, is that the big thing with a podcast, people are trying to sell something through it or whatever. But for me, it's about how do I actually get better at speaking? How do I actually communicate effectively? How do I market my podcast better? How do I market me better? How do we become better at branding? How do we become better at pretty much all of these small nuances that you only get through time? And the whole idea with me with this was that I fell in love with really the process, as cliche as it sounds, versus the outcome. For me, it didn't matter if I had 30 downloads or 3,000 downloads, because the idea was to get better, which is exactly how I started getting into helping other people with their podcast. So Voix is my media company, and that's basically grown into managing a whole suite of company podcasts and founder podcasts and entrepreneur podcasts. And what we effectively do is we manage and grow their podcasts. We basically take their show and grow the shit out of it. And why that happened was because one of my guests on my show literally reached out and said, oh, it was very professional. You moved the conversation very well. You obviously do a lot of background and study in this. Can you help us out? And I was like, yeah, sure. My first client was $600 retainer for a month. And I went in, and I remember I was quite scared at the time because I'm taking my knowledge of my podcast and helping other people. And over time, I became a bit more normal with the process, and I was able to identify, okay, this works for me, this works for someone else. Maybe there's a common thread here that behind marketing, sales, copywriting, design, thumbnails, this is what actually works. This is what gets to a broader audience. And only by putting in all of those reps was I able to get to that point. And now Voix is at a point whereby it's super niche. It's in the podcast space. It's a media company podcast space. There's not many people doing it to this degree. That's, young, has that kind of young touch vibe that's clean and minimal. And that's the USP. So the USP is the acquired knowledge that I put in through the pain, difficulty, and challenges. So imagine when you go to build anything, and if you do that work in the background. So for me, it was 3 years to get to the point whereby we have a business model that can be brought to enterprise clients, B2B clients, and founders. That took so long to get to that period, and then we got to that moment. So it was only by putting through that time, and then that's when I got even more invested into this industry, and I thought to myself, okay, there's something going on here that I think I can provide value for. I like to share my story. I like to help younger people live a richer and more fulfilling life. That's the whole purpose of kickoff sessions. And it can help other people from a business perspective. So I can now sell my service to other people and offer that as an expertise to some degree. So that's the whole idea in terms of like the actual strategy behind it. But it's been very, very difficult to get to that point. And now with kickoff sessions at 157 episodes or whatever it's at, it's going to need that extra gear to get to the next level, right? To get to the next level, which for me, I think where the industry goes is high quality production and all that kind of good stuff. But without getting into all the nerdy, dorky stuff, the main area here is about there that you only get to that point when you go fully in on something and you really focus 100%. So I was tailoring up my focus over the years and I was getting more and more concentrated on it. But because this was been a passion project, quote unquote, it turned into something that has been quite enormous now for me personally. That's what makes it a success. That's what will make it a success in the future. And I'm by no means there at the moment. There's a long road to go. There's many more stuff to uncover. And I think that's the best part about this journey is that there's the unknown unknowns and then there's the known unknowns. And that's where I want to get to in terms of like, as we grow the podcast, the brand, the business, and everything around it, and that ecosystem, which is kickoff sessions and Voix, that's when I'm going to really unlock the next layer of challenges, to be fair. There's a lot to be said about taking the long path with all this, right? Whenever you see shit online, on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever, you see people going from 0 to 50K in 24 hours. I can nearly guarantee you that's not the case, right? For 99% of people. And the reason why is because when you go into something new, it's going to be shit. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. And that is why that's why most people don't do it. There's that famous Alex Hormozy quote where it's like, this is what hard feels like. And that's exactly it. When I was running off recording podcasts, when a lot of people were out going to nightclubs and stuff, and I was editing at 2 o'clock in the morning or getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to record with someone on the west coast of the US, it was always shit and difficult, but I'm learning through that process, right? So that is taking the longer path, the harder path, and it's basically delaying gratification, right? The longer you can delay gratification, the better the reward. And in a world of, likes on Instagram or, boosted posts on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, the podcast route is longer, it's more arduous, but has a higher return on investment because of the fact that you're distilling your thoughts. You can go through any of my episodes for the last 3 years and find out exactly where I've been mentally, emotionally, even physically in my own kind of journey. I think that's what becomes very valuable because people can hopefully see that I'm not full of absolute shit when I'm talking and that I'm actually somewhat genuine with what I'm actually discussing because I've actually lived and breathed this actual industry. And the biggest thing here that most people underestimate is how long something will take. So after X amount of years, this is still not a major success, right? And all the content channels aren't 100% down, and I don't have 1 billion followers and $1 billion in a bank account. But true mastery takes decades. You look at any of the best sports stars, entrepreneurs, even like filmmakers, any of these people who have this incredible level of detail in what they do and their story and their journey, it takes so many years, okay? And it's all the failures, all the losses, right, that will get you there. So that's the biggest lesson is the fact that, yeah, I'm not fully 100% there yet, but the main thing is that I'm not going anywhere. So I'm 27 years old, I'm based in Asia, I've been living here for the last couple of years. It's not like I'm going anywhere anytime soon. My life design is set up very much around my business, my podcast, my lifestyle, my fitness as well, which is a big part of my entire lifestyle. So everything is geared towards those variables. So it's no surprise that they're going to improve. But the main thing is that about at what pace are they going to improve. So I've invested heavily more into my own education, heavily more into reinvesting into how I speak, how I perform, how I bring across our branding, how do we improve these nuances. But as I mentioned, it's over the long term, right? So when we look to get mastery, when we look to master a particular topic, we need to get into the the details, right? Which is also very interesting to just raise because of the fact that if you do 4 different things, you split all your focus and you effectively catch nothing, right? So try catch 2 hares, you catch none. The best thing about going super deep on one topic and having extreme ultimate focus is the fact that you realize how actually poor you are at certain aspects. Now, let me give you a detail. In the podcast world, it could be questions. I could be asking questions that are too long, that are too confusing, that guests don't understand or listeners find kind of boring and dull. And as a result, I wouldn't improve that if I don't work on my questions, right? But if I have my mind clouded with like 14 different things to do that day, I'm never going to think about my questions, right? So it's only by having that singularity focus, and at that point whereby something does take off and you have escape velocity and you may want to go off and do something else at that point, but I believe, my opinion is that it's difficult to go off and do multiple different things at once if you can't master the one thing, right? And that's why having people around you is very valuable. So of course, kickoff sessions has grown around the network. So whether I have people who are younger coming through, whether people that are actually younger and ahead of me, people like Dakota Robertson, Jack Hopkins, they're miles ahead of me, but they're effectively in your network, quote unquote, or people like Justin Waller who have like smashed it, are gone on to help many other people. They're the people that are the influences that help you guide towards the future path. So it's a combination of having that actual self-belief that you're not going to crumble tomorrow and you're going to get up every single day, be diligent, be focused, get it done, but then having the guided people in your actual network to help you get through. So I really recommend people to follow this path, whether it may not be podcasting for you. It could be just writing your own thoughts through tweets. It could be through Instagram. It could be posting like reels or effectively, but telling that story and letting your mind develop builds that brand. And over time, then people like, know, and trust you. So they see you for who you are, not for who you're trying to pretend to be effectively. So that's exactly it. You don't need to exactly say what you do. It just becomes apparent. So hopefully you enjoyed this short video / kind of podcast entry. Yeah, 1,000 days so far, hammering the same mission with the podcast. It's going to be much more to come from here. So I really appreciate you checking out this video. If you do enjoy this video, consider checking out some of my other content. Podcast University will teach you exactly how to launch, grow, and scale your own podcast from scratch. I'll give you my exact step-by-step process in terms of how I grew kickoff sessions, and it could be helpful for you. So check out Podcast University down below. I'll have all the details. And also, feel free to reach out to work with us in a collaboration process through Voix. Voix is my media company, which helps you launch and basically scale a lot of your podcast too from a B2B enterprise or founder's perspective. So if you were interested in something like that, feel free to drop me a message down below. And also like, subscribe, and comment too to see can we get more growth out of the channel. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.